Sunday always felt too quiet, not peaceful, just hollow, like the world had moved on to something soft and domestic and left me suspended in a waiting room between moments. That's why I kept the routine. Same laundromat, same time, same old machines lined in rows like bored soldiers. It gave shape to my day, structure to my silence. There's something about the hum of washers, the click of coins slipping into metal slots, the warm throb of dryers that feels almost like company. Not intimacy, no, just the sound of being among the living. I liked the smell, too. That oddly comforting cocktail of detergent, softener, hot air, and something faintly chemical. It reminded me of childhood in some distorted way. Mother's hands folding shirts, sunlight through linen, the illusion of order. I would walk past the vending machine stocked with dusty dryer sheets and stare at the posters peeling off the wall, ads for carpet cleaning, lost dog notices, outdated mask required signs no one took down. It all stayed the same week after week, and in that sameness I found quiet comfort, an unspoken contract between me and the machines. I'd keep showing up, and they'd keep spinning. I always sat in the same plastic chair near the third dryer, the one that wobbled slightly if you leaned too far back. I'd bring a book I never really read, sip a lukewarm coffee from the place down the street, and watch the towels tumble like they were caught in some private storm. I like to pretend this hour was sacred, that it gave me something useful to do. But really, it was about not being home, about not having to sit in the stillness of my apartment where the air felt like it pressed too tightly against my skin. That day, the weather was heavy. Not cold, not hot, just damp. My coat clung to my back by the time I walked in, and the warm breath of the laundromat wrapped around me like an accidental hug. The place was half empty. A man reading his phone with earbuds in, an older woman shaking out a comforter, and her. She was standing in front of a washer, folding a hoodie with slow precision. She had a basket balanced on her hip, a pair of worn sneakers, then damp curls gathered messily at the back of her head. Her clothes were simple, soft jeans, an oversized shirt that hung open just enough to reveal the curve of her collarbone. I watched her for a second longer than I meant to, then turned away as if caught looking through a window that wasn't mine. She moved differently from the others, not rushed or mechanical. Each motion was deliberate, like she understood the language of fabric. The way her fingers pressed along the edges of a towel, smoothing the fold, made my breath catch in the back of my throat for reasons I didn't examine. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense, but something about her rhythm felt magnetic, familiar even. Or maybe I was just lonely. I went about my routine, sorted, measured, poured. I leaned against the machine as it began to fill, listening to the water rise and beat against cotton like fingers drumming on skin. I tried to read, but the words blurred. My attention kept drifting. My eyes returned to her again and again, pulled like tide to moon. At one point, she looked up, not at me, just up, as if catching a scent on the air. Her eyes flicked toward my machine. She tilted her head, then smiled, a small, amused curve, like she knew something I didn't. I looked away, heat rising in my chest. Not embarrassment, something deeper, a tightness. I focused on the spinning, let myself fall into the trance of movement. But she remained in the edge of my vision, a quiet constant. When she walked past me to get a dryer sheet from the vending machine, the air changed. I caught the scent of her shampoo, clean, sweet, with a faint note of citrus. My skin responded before I could stop it, goosebumps breaking across my arms. I folded slowly when my load finished. I took my time, matching socks, smoothing shirts, pressing fingers along seams like I was shaping something important. I didn't know what I was waiting for, only that it wasn't clean towels. She was nearby again. I felt her before I saw her, sensed the way space shifted to make room for her presence. She stood beside me for a moment, too close for strangers, and yet no part of me moved away. Her eyes scanned my pile of clothes. I expected her to walk on, but she didn't. She reached forward, lifted one of my t-shirts gently, and began to fold it. Not with performance, not to make a statement, just to help, as if it was the most natural thing in the world, as if she had always done it. My mouth went dry. My hands paused in the air like birds that forgot how to fly. I watched the way her fingers traced the hem, the way she flipped the sleeves inward with exactness. Then she placed it neatly on top of the pile and reached for the next item. I should have said something, should have stopped her, but I didn't. I stood still, heart beating somewhere near my ears, and let her touch my things. Let her touch me by extension. There was something achingly intimate about it, this quiet act, this folding of fabric that had spent hours pressed against my skin. She didn't look at me as she moved, didn't ask permission. She simply offered presence, and I accepted it, standing in a fluorescent-lit laundromat surrounded by strangers and suds, feeling more seen than I had in years. When she finally looked up, her eyes met mine, and something passed between us. Not heat, not certainty, but a question, one I wasn't ready to answer, but already wanted to hear again. I folded the last towel without looking down. My fingers were trembling. My pulse thudded in my wrists. But I didn't move. I stood there in the silence, between machines, between cycles, and waited, just in case she wasn't finished. The next Sunday, I arrived earlier than usual. I told myself it was because I had more laundry this time, but my hamper was only half full. The truth pulsed beneath the surface, unspoken but undeniable. I wanted to see her again. I didn't know her name, didn't know anything about her life, but the image of her folding my shirt had clung to me all week like static. I kept replaying the moment in my mind, the weight of her presence beside me, the casual confidence in her hands, the quiet invitation in her glance. It haunted me in the best way, soft and intrusive, like fingers pressing through water. She was already there when I walked in. Same spot, same damp hair. A new shirt, this one gray and fitted, clinging to the curves of her shoulders. She looked up briefly, and our eyes met, and in that glance, something inside me loosened. I didn't smile, neither did she. We didn't need to. It was enough that we both noticed, that we both remembered. I took the machine closest to hers, pretending it was coincidence. She didn't move, didn't speak, just continued sorting through her basket with the same meticulous care, like she was tending to something sacred. I tried to act normal, loaded my clothes, added detergent, pressed the start button, but every movement felt deliberate, rehearsed. My body was humming with a strange anticipation, low and steady, like the buildup before a storm. I didn't know what I was waiting for, only that I was waiting. As the machines rumbled to life, I sat down, trying not to look at her. But the way she moved, fluid, slow, unhurried, kept pulling me in. She wasn't folding anymore. She was transferring wet clothes from the washer to the dryer. I watched as her arms dipped into the drum, water clinging to her forearms, droplets running down to her elbows. Her skin gleamed under the overhead lights, and the muscles in her shoulders flexed with every lift. The fabric slapped softly as it hit the inside of the dryer. Each motion was hypnotic. Then she turned to her own basket and began folding what she had already dried. Her fingers moved differently this time, slower, more deliberate. It was as if she was performing for an audience she knew was watching, though her gaze never left her hands. A shirt creased perfectly down the middle. A towel pressed flat, then smoothed again with both palms. She treated each item like it mattered, like it held a memory she wanted to preserve. I couldn't help myself. I moved closer under the pretense of checking my load. I didn't speak. I just stood there, pretending to watch the machine spin, but I was watching her. Her hands, the way her fingertips brushed fabric like skin, the way her thumbs pressed into corners and her wrists flicked with quiet command. I imagined those hands on me, soft, confident, sure. I imagined how they would feel trailing down my side, across my hip, lingering in places untouched for too long. My breath grew shallow. My body betrayed me. She didn't look at me, but she knew I was there. I could feel the awareness pass between us like current, a charge in the space between our shoulders, a shift in the air. She reached for one of her own shirts, dark blue, thin cotton, and began folding it in half, then again, her fingers pressing into the fabric like she was memorizing its weight. I stood too still, my arms stiff, my heart climbing into my throat. Then she moved, just a little, her body angled toward me, still folding, still silent, but now unmistakably aware. The space between us felt smaller, not in distance, but in permission. My skin tingled. I could hear the pulse in my ears. The low hum of the dryers faded into something deeper, almost like breathing. I didn't know if it was hers or mine. She stepped closer, just enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. My side burned where her shoulder nearly grazed mine. I froze, unsure whether to move away or lean in. Her hand reached out, not to touch me, but to place the folded shirt on the communal counter we now shared. It brushed against my forearm as she pulled back. Light, barely there, but it set off a cascade inside me, a ripple of sensation that left my knees weak. My dryer buzzed. The sudden noise startled me back into motion. I opened the door, the heat rushing out in a wave that only made my body feel colder by comparison. I pulled out a towel and held it limply, unsure of what to do next. My fingers fumbled. I couldn't focus. She was still beside me, still folding her own laundry with the same calm intensity. But now every movement felt like a whisper meant only for me. I forced myself to fold the towel, but my hands were clumsy, awkward, trembling in ways I couldn't hide. She noticed. She didn't say anything, of course not, but I saw it in the tilt of her head, the pause of her hands. And then, just like before, she reached for the towel in my hands, not to take it, to help. Her fingers brushed mine as she adjusted the fabric, guiding the fold. Her touch was gentle, but not uncertain. She flattened the towel with her palm, her hand gliding slowly over the terry cloth, and then let it rest for a heartbeat too long. I felt it through every layer of skin. Heat bloomed in my chest, my pulse thudded behind my knees, my breath caught in my throat. She lifted her hand and placed the towel beside the others. And then, just as calmly, she reached for the next one. This time, I didn't move. I let her take it, let her fold it, let her fingers pass so near to mine again and again that I forgot how to stand. We folded side by side, the rhythm between us growing steadier, almost synchronized, a quiet choreography of shared breath and brushed knuckles, and the unspoken question growing louder between us. I didn't speak. Neither did she. But with every crease, every contact, every slow slide of fabric over skin, I felt something building, something unnamed, something intimate in its silence. I folded shirts I'd worn to bed alone, pants that still carried the shape of my legs, underwear she touched without hesitation. Nothing about it was lewd, and yet everything about it was electric. When we finished, she stacked the folded clothes into my basket and stepped back. Her fingers trailed once more along the edge of the top towel, as if reluctant to let go. I stood motionless, unsure if I was supposed to say thank you or something more, but she simply turned and returned to her own machine. I watched her go, my throat tight, my body aching in strange, unexpected places, and as I gathered my basket and headed for the door, I realized something had shifted. I no longer came to the laundromat to escape the silence. I came to feel it break, gently, softly, at the hands of a woman who folded fabric like she already knew the shape of my skin. The third time didn't feel like a coincidence. I told myself it was chance, that we were just two women with overlapping routines. But deep down, I knew I had been adjusting my schedule, arriving a little later, stalling at home until the timing felt right. I'd linger in the kitchen, pretending to look for my keys, or scroll through my phone until my chest told me it was time. Time to walk the quiet 4 blocks and step into that humid, humming space where the air always felt like it belonged to her. She was already there when I arrived. She always was. I don't know how she timed it or if she just stayed longer than necessary. She stood near the end row, the one with the long folding table and the machine that always squeaked when the drum hit a certain rhythm. Her back was to me, her hair damp again, pulled into a messy knot that exposed the nape of her neck. I noticed the beads of moisture still clinging to her skin, trailing down like punctuation marks along her spine. She wore a pale shirt today, nearly translucent, and I could make out the soft lines of her body underneath it. My pulse jumped before I even moved. I took the machine next to hers. My fingers shook slightly as I fed coins into the slot, but I kept my face neutral, calm, detached, as if this didn't matter more than it should, as if I hadn't spent the entire week dreaming about her hands brushing mine, about the way she folded my towel like she was touching me instead of cotton. I loaded my laundry slowly, drawing it out, giving myself time to watch her through the corners of my eyes. She was folding again, this time jeans, shirts, something that looked like silk. Her palms smoothed over every surface, her fingertips pressing into seams, her wrists rotating with casual, unthinking sensuality. Every motion felt curated just for me. Not deliberately seductive, just aware, present, like she knew exactly how it looked when her fingers curled under a waistband or tugged gently at a stubborn sleeve, like she knew the way my body responded to the smallest gestures now, the flick of her wrist, the pause of her breath. I stood near the folding table, pretending to arrange my own clothes. The heat from the dryer pressed against my skin, making everything feel damp and overly sensitive. I picked up a t-shirt and ran my hands along the edge, trying to mimic her grace, but I fumbled. The fabric slipped from my grip. It landed at her feet. I didn't move. She looked down at it for a moment, then crouched slowly, knees bending with a fluid elegance that made my stomach twist. She picked up the shirt carefully, stood, and held it out toward me, but instead of handing it over, she began folding it. Her eyes didn't leave the fabric, but I could feel the attention in every movement. Her fingers smoothed the cotton with impossible care, drawing the shape of the shirt like she was sketching me in reverse. She creased it neatly and placed it on the table in front of me. My breath caught. My throat felt dry. I reached for another shirt, offered it to her. She took it without hesitation, without a glance, and folded it too. And then another, and another. We fell into rhythm like dancers who had always known the steps. I handed her each piece, and she folded it, each one slower than the last. The space between us grew thinner. The heat intensified. I began to feel the tremble in my hands, not from nerves, but from something deeper. Need, memory, anticipation. Her knuckles brushed mine with every exchange. Her nails scraped lightly against the back of my fingers as she reached. I didn't flinch. I didn't want to. Then came the moment that fractured everything. I handed her a pair of underwear. I hadn't meant to. It slipped in with the t-shirts, unthinking, automatic. But as soon as it touched her hands, I froze. My breath halted. My body tensed. It was a soft black pair, cotton, worn, intimate in its simplicity. She paused for the briefest second, her thumbs grazing the waistband, and something in her shifted. I felt it. She folded it slowly, too slowly. Her fingers lingered. She didn't look at me, but I saw her chest rise and fall with more weight than before. She placed the folded piece at the top of the pile, and I stared at it as if it were a confession. My mouth tasted like static. My palms were damp. The air in the room felt thick, charged, like a thunderstorm about to break. She reached for the next item, but I stepped back, not out of discomfort, out of the sudden, dizzy realization that I wanted more than this, more than careful touches and quiet glances, more than fabric and breath. I wanted her hands on me, not through the barrier of cotton or ritual, but directly, skin to skin, no pretense, no folding. She didn't follow. She didn't speak. But her fingers slowed. Her breathing deepened. Her body stilled in a way that made it clear she felt it too. That the folding had become something else. A code, a language. Each crease was a whisper. Each press of her palm a promise. And now, with that one piece of fabric, we had said too much to pretend we hadn't. I busied myself, repacking my basket, stacking my clothes too quickly, too carelessly. My body was humming, unsteady. I avoided looking at her, but I felt her watching me. Her gaze slid down my spine like a silk ribbon, invisible and undeniable. I turned once, just enough to catch the edge of her expression. Soft lips parted, eyes darkened, chest rising slowly, like she was holding something back. I left before she did. The walk home was a blur. My hands were still trembling when I unlocked my apartment. The basket felt heavier than it should. I set it down by the couch, sat beside it, and stared at the folded pile for a long time. At the black cotton, folded with such aching care. The first fold where the tremble had hidden. I touched it, held it to my chest, closed my eyes. Her hands had been there, and now they were on me, even in absence, even in silence. I didn't know what this was becoming, but I knew it had already started, and I knew I didn't want it to stop. It happened on a Wednesday, not a Sunday. That alone made everything feel different, charged, like we had stepped out of routine and into something uncontained. I hadn't meant to go that day. My schedule had been disrupted, my mind restless. I needed to feel the steady hum of machines, to smell detergent and heat, and that strange mix of artificial cleanliness and body warmth. I didn't expect her to be there, but she was. And when I saw her through the glass door, crouched near the floor with her basket, something in my chest collapsed and reformed all at once. The laundromat was quiet. Too quiet, the kind of stillness that hangs in the air before something breaks. I moved toward the back, drawn to her like gravity, not saying anything, not even pretending it was about laundry anymore. She looked up, and in that glance there was recognition, relief, and something heavier, something unspeakable that trembled between our bodies like a thread pulled tight. She didn't move away when I stood beside her. She didn't ask questions. Instead, she lifted a warm towel from her basket, spread it on the floor beside the dryers, and sat down on it. Her knees bent, one leg folded under her, the other stretched long and casual. Her shirt clung slightly to her back, damp from the heat or maybe from nerves. She reached for a second towel and patted the space beside her. I lowered myself beside her, heart pounding in my throat, the thin denim of my jeans feeling too rough against my skin. We didn't speak. There were no words in this place now. Only motion, only breath, only the rustling of fabric and the low mechanical growl of machines churning in the background like a distant heartbeat. Her hand reached for mine, not with flourish, not with hesitation, but with a kind of quiet certainty. Our fingers interlaced. Her palm was warm, dry, steady. I stared at her hand against mine, the contrast of our skin, the small twitch of her thumb over my knuckles. That single point of contact lit a fuse inside me, slow and steady and impossible to ignore. She shifted closer, her thigh pressed into mine. Her breath brushed against my cheek as she leaned in, her face so near I could see the tiny freckles at the corner of her mouth. My lips parted, not in invitation, but in surrender. And still she waited. Her forehead rested against my temple, her breath slow and deliberate, as if she were giving me time to meet her in the silence. Then her hand slid beneath my shirt. It was a gradual exploration, her fingertips gliding along the curve of my waist, up my ribs, pausing just beneath the edge of my bra. My skin responded instantly, goosebumps racing across my arms, my stomach tightening beneath her touch. I exhaled sharply, and she paused for a moment, as if reading my reaction like Braille. Then she continued. Her palm flattened against my side, grounding me. I leaned back on my hands, allowing the shirt to ride up, bearing more of my stomach, exposing the soft undercurve of my breasts. Her eyes followed every inch, not hungrily, but with something deeper, like reverence, like awe. She pulled my shirt higher and lowered her mouth to my skin. The first kiss landed just below my ribs, soft, damp. Her lips barely pressed, but the heat of her breath lingered, seeping through me in slow, molten waves. Another kiss, slightly higher, then a third at the center of my chest. Her hands steadied me as her mouth explored, her fingers tightening on my back each time I shivered beneath her. She laid me down gently, the towel beneath me bunching beneath my shoulders. I stared at the ceiling for a moment, trying to believe this was real. The fluorescent lights above flickered faintly, but I didn't care. My focus narrowed to the way her hands slid along my thighs, to the weight of her body settling between them, to the kiss she placed just below my navel that made my hips rise involuntarily. She unbuttoned my jeans slowly, her fingers working with quiet purpose, not as if claiming, but as if asking and receiving all at once. I lifted my hips to help her, surrendering the last of the barrier between us. She peeled the denim down my legs, along with my underwear, bearing me completely. The air was warm, but I felt cold everywhere she wasn't touching. Her mouth returned to my stomach, lower now, moving with agonizing patience. Her breath ghosted over my pelvis before she lowered her lips between my legs. I arched the moment her tongue touched me. There was no rush in her, no frenzy. She moved like she had time to learn every detail, every reaction, every rhythm I had ever needed. Her tongue circled slowly, drawing soft patterns that built and built until my breath became uneven. My fingers found her hair and held gently, not to guide, but to ground myself in something solid. My thighs trembled around her, and still she continued, adjusting the pressure, the pace, reading my body like it spoke a language she'd always known. When release came, it wasn't an explosion. It was a collapse, a slow unspooling, a quiet surrender that left me boneless and breathless and burning. I lay there, chest heaving, arms limp, eyes unfocused. She crawled up beside me, her body warm and solid and real, her face nestled against my neck, her breath damp against my skin. We stayed like that, on the floor, on a towel, between machines and cycles and hours we didn't name. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't want to leave. The air in the laundromat felt wrong the next time I came. It was colder, despite the heat of the machines, and there was a tightness in my chest I couldn't shake, a weight that pressed against my ribs like something unwelcome. I hadn't seen her in days, not since that afternoon on the floor when her mouth had erased everything I thought about loneliness. I had expected her to be waiting or to show up behind me with that familiar quiet presence, but she hadn't come, not the next day, not the one after that. And when I walked in this time, I sensed the shift before I saw it. She was there, but not alone. He was with her, a man, broad-shouldered, impatient, standing too close, speaking in low tones that didn't carry. I didn't hear his words, but I saw the way her body tensed. I saw the way she laughed, short, brittle, like glass about to crack. Her arms folded over her stomach, her eyes rarely meeting his. She looked smaller than I remembered, tighter, reduced. I moved to the back, heart thudding, throat dry, fingers fumbling with my basket. I didn't want to look at her, but I couldn't stop. She avoided my gaze, or maybe she didn't know I was there. But then, for the briefest second, her eyes flicked up and locked onto mine. They were different, not distant, not dismissive, but hollow, as if someone had scraped out everything soft and left only a shell behind. I turned away, swallowed hard, and focused on loading my clothes. The water rushed in. The smell of detergent filled my nose. But underneath it all, I caught something else. A scent too faint, too sour, metallic, acrid. It crawled into my lungs like smoke. When I glanced back, he was gone. She was alone again, sitting on the bench by the window, knees drawn up, arms wrapped tight around her legs, her head tilted down, hair falling forward. She looked like she was folding inward, vanishing cell by cell. I wanted to go to her. I wanted to kneel in front of her and reach for her face, to tell her she wasn't invisible. But my legs refused to move. Instead, she stood slowly, gathered her things, and walked toward me. Not quickly, not like before. There was no softness in her steps now, only silence. When she reached me, she didn't speak. She placed a single item on the counter between us, a towel, one of hers, still damp, still warm. I stared at it, confused, uncertain. Her hands brushed the edge of the counter, and for a split second, I caught sight of something on her wrist. A bruise, not fresh, but not old either, faint purple bleeding into yellow. I blinked, looked again. She'd already turned, walking away, her shoulders too stiff, her posture too practiced. I reached for the towel. The fabric was soft beneath my fingers, but wrong. It smelled faintly of her, but something else too, something sharp. I lifted it closer to my face without thinking, inhaled and recoiled. There was blood. Not much, just a trace. Dried, faint, hidden in the fibers. But it was there. I knew that scent too well. Iron and salt and silence. It clung to my fingertips. I dropped the towel, heart pounding, stomach curling in on itself like a fist. I looked up, but she was already outside, crossing the parking lot with that same tight, robotic grace. I stood there, frozen, my hands suddenly foreign to me. The machines churned, the lights buzzed. A child laughed somewhere near the soda machine, but the world had gone gray. Later, I would find another piece of her clothing in my basket, a shirt I hadn't noticed before, not mine. Folded neatly, almost reverently, as if by habit. I unfolded it with trembling fingers, and there, on the inside collar, was another stain, fainter this time, like a whisper, like a warning. I washed it, twice, scrubbed it with soap until my knuckles burned, but the stain remained, not visible to the eye anymore, but there, beneath the threads, beneath the skin. I folded it again, carefully, and placed it in my drawer. I couldn't throw it away. I didn't see her again that week. I kept going back, hoping, watching the door, listening for her footsteps, but she never returned. Only the towel did. I left it on the folding table once, half hoping she'd come for it, but someone else took it, an old man. He didn't even glance at it, just tossed it into his cart like any other forgotten thing. That night, I dreamt of her, but it wasn't the way I remembered. In the dream, her mouth was stained. Her hands were shaking. She whispered something I couldn't hear and pressed a shirt to her chest like armor. When I reached for her, she bled through her clothes, and I stood there, palms open, catching nothing. I woke up drenched in sweat, the scent of fabric softener and blood stuck in my nose. Something had been taken from her, or maybe given, or maybe traded. I didn't know what to do with the ache in my chest. It wasn't longing anymore. It was something messier. Guilt, grief, hunger, contamination. She had touched me, opened me, and now, even in her absence, I was stained. I kept going back long after the machines had stopped meaning anything. It wasn't about laundry anymore. I'd run out of things to wash weeks ago, but I still carried a half-filled basket like a prop, an excuse, something to anchor me to that space. I lingered near the door longer each time, hoping for a glimpse of her, that familiar slope of her shoulder, the nod of her hair, the curve of her back when she leaned over a dryer. But she never came again, not in the way I needed her to. The laundromat was colder now. Not the kind of cold you feel in your fingers, but the kind that settles into your bones like a slow, creeping leak. The lights buzzed louder. The chairs felt harder. The scent of detergent, once comforting, now clung to the back of my throat like mildew. I stopped bringing books. I stopped pretending to read. I'd sit by the third dryer, hands in my lap, basket at my feet, and listen to the machines spin, just spin, endlessly, as if repetition could resurrect something. Her absence became something I wore, like a smell I couldn't scrub out of fabric. The bruises I had seen on her wrist haunted me. They didn't go away. They deepened, multiplied in my mind. I imagined worse things, things I couldn't say aloud. I imagined her behind a closed door, lips split, voice silenced. I imagined the taste of blood on her tongue and her eyes turning blank. I imagined her folding clothes with trembling fingers in a different laundromat, in a different city, pretending none of this had happened. I didn't even know her name. One night, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling spun above me, and my sheets were too tight, too warm, too sterile. I got up, dressed, didn't even think. I walked the 8 blocks in the dark, under sodium lights and broken street lamps, past shuttered windows and empty sidewalks. I didn't care what time it was. The laundromat was open 24 hours. The door creaked when I entered. The hum was lower, more ghostly, like a memory echoing inside a shell. It was empty. The lights buzzed like insects. The floor was sticky in places. Someone had spilled detergent near the back, and it had dried into a cloudy smear. I sat on the floor near the folding table, the same spot where we'd once been spread out like a secret. I pressed my palms against the tile. It was cold, unforgiving, and I welcomed it. I closed my eyes and tried to feel her body again, her breath on my skin, her fingers under my shirt, the heat of her mouth. But all I could feel was tile and cold and absence. I don't know how long I stayed there. Hours, maybe. When I stood, my legs were stiff, my back ached. I opened the washer closest to me, empty and dry, and placed my hand inside. The drum was cool and slick. I climbed in. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to feel contained. Maybe I wanted to be spun, to be rattled around and cleansed, and wrung out like a shirt that had held too many things. My knees bent awkwardly, my arms folded across my chest. The door was still open, but I could hear my breath bouncing off the metal, amplified and strange. I imagined her climbing in after me, curling her body into mine, our limbs tangled, pressed into the metal together. I imagined the door closing, locking us in, the drum beginning to spin, fast and violent, shaking us until nothing was left but sweat and cloth and breathless silence. I imagined being stripped of every layer of memory. I imagined cold water flooding in. When I opened my eyes, something was in my lap, a scrap of paper. It must have fallen from the lint trap above the machine. I picked it up with trembling fingers. A receipt, a smudged phone number. No name, just numbers, faint, almost invisible. My chest seized. My hands shook. I stood slowly, legs stiff and trembling, and walked to the nearest payphone, still clinging to the wall outside like a relic. I dialed, ringing. No answer. Then a click, breathing, but no voice. I held the phone to my ear, listened to her inhale, her exhale, her silence. She was there. I didn't speak. Neither did she. The line went dead after 37 seconds. I stayed by the phone until sunrise. The next day, I returned to the laundromat again, this time with nothing. No basket, no clothes, just me. I opened one of the machines at random, climbed inside again, curled into myself, and imagined the sound of water rushing in. The cold rinse, the final cycle. I closed my eyes and waited.